Hello and welcome. This is the Comfortable Narrator. Now, during the course of these videos, I will be doing narrations on certain books. As for this one, it is Thomas Harris, The Silence of the Lamb. I will read a few chapters and so on and so forth until the book is finished. Thank you for subscribing and being a part of these narrations. And if you want some background about me, I'll give you my bio in the description. Let us begin. To the memory of my father. Chapter 1. Behavioral Science. The FBI section that deals with serial murder is on the bottom floor of the Academy building at Quantico. Half buried in the earth, Clarice Starlings reached it flushed after a fast walk from Hogan's Alley on the firing range. She had grass in her hair and grass stains on her FBI Academy windbreaker from driving to the ground under fire in an arrest problem on the range. No one was in the outer office, so she fluffled briefly by her reflection in the glass doors. She knew she could look all right without primping. Her hands smelled of gun smoke, but there was no time to wash. Section Chief Crawford's summons had said, "Now." She found Jack Crawford alone in the cluttered suite of offices. He was standing at someone else's desk, talking on the telephone, and she had a chance to look him over for the first time in a year. What she saw disturbed her. Normally, Crawford looked like a fit, middle-aged engineer who might have paid his way through college playing baseball. A crafty catcher, tough when he blocked the plate. Now he was thin. His shirt collar was too big, and he had dark puffs under his reddened eyes. Everyone who could read the papers knew the behavioral science section was catching hell. Starling hoped Crawford wasn't on the juice. That seemed most unlikely here. Crawford ended his telephone conversation with a sharp "No." He took her file from under his arm and opened it. Starling, Clarice M. Good morning, he said. Hello. Her smile was only polite. Nothing's wrong. I hope that call didn't spook you. No, not totally true. Starling thought. Your instructions tell me you're doing well. Top quarter of the class. I hope so. They haven't posted anything. I ask them from time to time. That surprised Starling. She had written Crawford off as a two-faced recruiting surgeon son of a bitch. She had met Special Agent Crawford when he was a guest lecturer at the University of Virginia. The quality of his criminology seminars was a factor in her coming to the Bureau. She wrote him a note when she qualified for the academy, but he never replied, and for 3 months she had been a trainee at Quantico. He had ignored her. Starling came from people who do not ask for favors or press for friendship, but she was puzzled and regretful at Crawford's behavior. Now, in his presence, she liked him again, she was sorry to note. Clearly something was wrong with him. There was a peculiar cleverness in Crawford. Aside from his intelligence, and Starling had first noticed it in his hair, in his color sense, and the textures of his clothing, even within the FBI clone standards of agent dress. Now he was neat but drab, as though he were molting. A job came up, and I thought about you, he said. It's not really a job, it's more of an interesting errand. Bush praised stuff off that chair and sit down. You put down here that you want to come directly to behavioral science when you get through with the academy. I do. You have a lot of forensics, but no law enforcement background. We look for 6 years, minimum. My father was a marshal. I know the life. Crawford smiled a little. What you do have is a double major in psychology and criminology. How many summers working in a mental health center? 2? 2. Your counselor's license, is it current? It's good for 2 more years. I got it before you had the seminar at UVA, before I decided to do this. You got stuck in the hiring freeze, Starling nodded. I was lucky, though. I found out in time to qualify as a forensic fellow. Then I could work in the lab until the academy had an opening. You wrote to me about coming here, didn't you? and I don't think I answered. I know, I didn't. I should have. You've had plenty else to do. Do you know about FBI CAP? I know it's the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. The Law Enforcement Bulletin says you're working on a database, but you aren't operational yet. Crawford nodded. We've developed a questionnaire. It applies to all the known serial murders in modern times. He handed her a thick sheaf of papers in a flimsy binding. There's a section for investigators, and one for surviving victims, if any. The blue is for the killer to answer, if he will, and the pink is a series of questions an examiner asks the killer, getting his reactions as well as his answers. It's a lot of paperwork. Paperwork! Clarice Starling's self-interest snuffled. Ahead, little like a keen beagle, she smelled a job offer coming. Probably the drudgery of feeding raw data into a new computer system. It was tempting to get into behavioral science in any capacity she could, but she knew what happens to a woman if she ever pegged as a secretary. It sticks until the end of time. A choice was coming, and she wanted to choose well. Crawford was waiting for something. He must have asked her a question. Starling had to scramble to recall it. What test have you given? Minnesota multiphasic ever? Rorschach? Yes, MMBI, PI. Never Rorschach, she said. I've done thematic perception, and I've given children Bender Gestalt. Do you ever spook easily, Starling? Not yet. See, we've tried to interview and examine all the 32 known serial murders we have in custody to build up a database for psychological profiling in unsolved cases. Most of them went along with it. I think they are driven to show off, a lot of them. 27 were willing to cooperate. 4 on death row with appeals pending, clammed up. Understandably, but the one we want the most, we haven't been able to get. I want you to go after him tomorrow, in the asylum. Claire Starling felt a glad knocking in her chest, and some apprehension too. Who's the subject? The psychiatrist, Dr. Hannibal Lecter, Crawford said. A brief silence follows the name, always in any civilized gathering. Starling looked at Crawford steadily, but she was too still. Hannibal the cannibal, she said. Yes. Yes, well, okay, right. I'm glad of the chance, but you have to know, I'm wondering, why me? Mainly because you're available, Crawford said. I don't expect him to cooperate. He's already refused, but it was through an intermediary, the director of the hospital. I have to be able to say our qualified examiner went to him and asked him personally. There are reasons that don't concern you. I don't have anybody left in this section to do it. You're jammed. Buffalo Bill, and the things in Nevada, Starling said. You got it. It's the old story. Not enough warm bodies. You said tomorrow? You're in a hurry? Any bearing on a current case? No, I wish there were. If you box on me, do you still want a psychological evaluation? No, I'm waist deep in inaccessible patient evaluations of Dr. Lecter, and they're all different. Crawford shook 2 vitamin C tablets into his palm and mixed an seltzer at the water cooler to wash them down. It's ridiculous, you know. Lecter's a psychiatrist, and he writes for the psychiatric journals himself. Extraordinary stuff, but it's never about his own little anomalies. He pretended to go along with the hospital director. Chilton, once in some tests, sitting around with a blood pressure cuff on his penis, looking at wreck pictures. Then Lecter published first what he learned about Chilton and made a fool out of him. He responds to a serious correspondence from psychiatric students in fields unrelated to his case, and that's all he does. If he won't talk to you, I just want straight reporting. How does he look? How does his cell look? What's he doing? Local color, so to speak. Watch out for the press going in and coming out. Not the real press. The supermarket press. They love Lecter, even better than Prince Andrew. Didn't Azilio magazine offer him $50,000 for some recipes? I seem to remember that, Starling said. Crawford nodded. I'm pretty sure the National Teleter had bought somebody inside the hospital, and they may know you're coming after I make the appointment. Crawford leaned forward until he faced her at a distance of 2 feet. She watched his half-glasses blur the bags under his eyes. He had glared recently with Listerine, gargled recently with Listerine. Now, I want your full attention. Starling, are you listening to me? Yes, sir. Be very careful with Hannibal Lecter. Dr. Chilton, the head of the mental hospital, will go over this psychol the physical procedure you use to deal with him. Don't deviate from it. Do not deviate from it one iota for any reason. If Lecter talks to you at all, he'll just be trying to find out about you. It's the kind of curiosity that makes a snake look in a bird's nest. We both know you have to back and forth a little in interviews, but you tell him no specifics about yourself. You don't want any of your personal facts in his head. You know what he did to Will Graham. I read about it when it happened. He gutted Will with a liniment knife when Will caught up with him. It's a wonder Will didn't die. Remember the Red Dragon? Lecter turned Francis Dollarhard into Will and his family. Will's face looks like damn Picasso drew him, thanks to Lecter. He tore a nurse up in the asylum. Do your job. Just don't ever forget what it is. What he is. And what's that? Do you know? I know he's a monster. Beyond that, nobody can say for sure. Maybe you'll find out. I didn't pick you out of a hat. Starling, you asked me a couple of interesting questions when I was at UVA. The director will see your own report over your signature. If it's clear and tight and organized, I decide that. And I will have it by 0900 Sunday. Okay? Starling carried on in the prescribed manner. Crawford smiled at her, but his eyes were dead. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Dr. Frederick Chilton, 58, administrator of the Baltimore State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, has a long, wide desk upon which there are no hard or sharp objects. Some of the staff call it the moat. Other staff members don't know what the word moat means. Dr. Chilton remained seated behind his desk when Clarice Starling came into his office. We've had a lot of detectives here, but I can't remember one so attractive, Chillington said without getting up. Starling knew without thinking about it that the shine on his extended hand was Lennion from patting his hair. She let go before he did. It is Miss Sterling, isn't it? It's Starling, Doctor, with an A. Thank you for your time. So the FBI is going to the girls like everything else. He added the tobacco smile he uses to separate his sentences. The Bureau's improving, Dr. Chillington. It certainly is. Will you be in Baltimore for several days? You know, you can have just as good a time here as you can in Washington or New York, if you know the town. She looked away to spare herself a smile, and knew at once that he had registered her distaste. I'm sure it's a great town, but my instructions are to see Dr. Lecter and report back this afternoon. Is there some place I could call you in Washington for a follow-up later on? Of course. It's kind of you to think of it. The Special Agent Jack Crawford's in charge of this project, and you can always reach me through him. I see, Chillington said. His cheeks molted with pink, clashed with the improbable red-brown of his coif. Give me your identification, please. He let her remain standing, though his leisure examination of her ID card. Then he handed it back and rose. This won't take much time. Come along. I understand you'd brief me, Dr. Chillington, Starling said. I can do that while we walk. He came around his desk, looking at his watch. I have a lunch in a half an hour. Damn it, she should have read him better. Quicker. He might not be a total jerk. He might know something useful. He wouldn't have hurt her to simper once, even if it wasn't good at all. Dr. Chilton, I have an appointment with you now. It was set at your convenience when you could give me some time. Things could come up during the interview. I may need to go over some of his responses with you. I really, really doubt it. Oh, I need to make a telephone call before we go. I'll catch up with you in the outer office. I like to leave my coat and umbrella here. Out there, Chillington said. Give them to Elena, in the outer office. He'll put them away. Alan wore the pajama-like garments issued to the inmates. He was wiping out ashtrays with the tail of his shirt. He rolled his tongue around in his cheek as he took Starling's coat. Thank you, she said. You're more than welcome. How often do you shift? Alan asked. What did you say? Does it come out long? I'll hang these somewhere myself. You don't have anything in the way. You can bend over and watch it come out and see it if it changes color when the air hits it. Do you do that? Does it look like you have a big brown tail? He wouldn't let go of the coat. Dr. Chillington wants you in his office right now, Starling said. No, I don't, Dr. Chillington said. Put the coat in the closet, Alan, and don't get it out while we're gone. Do it. I had a full-time office girl, but the cutbacks robbed me of her. Now the girl who let you in types 3 hours a day, and then I have Alan. We're all the office girls. Where are all the office girls, Miss Starling? His spectacles flashed at her. Are you armed? No, I'm not armed. May I see your purse and briefcase? You saw my credentials, and they say you're a student. Let me see your things, please. Clary Starling flinched as the first of the heavy steel gates clashed shut behind her, and the bolt shot home. Chillington walked slightly ahead, down the green institutional corridor in an atmosphere of Lysol and distant slammings. Starling was angry at herself for letting Chillington put his hand in her purse and briefcase, and she stepped hard on the anger so that she could concentrate. It was all right. She felt her control solid beneath her, like a good gravel bottom in a fast current. Lecter is a considerable nuisance, Chillington said over his shoulder. It takes an orderly at least 10 minutes a day to remove the staples from the publications he receives. We tried to eliminate or reduce his subscriptions, but he wrote a brief and the court overruled us. The volume of his personal mail used to be enormous. Thankfully, it's dwindled since he's been overshadowed by other creatures in the news. For a while, it seemed that every little student doing a master's thesis in psychology wanted something from Lecter in it. Medical journals still publish him, but it's just for the freak value of his benign. He did a good piece on surgical addiction in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry, I thought, Starling said. You did you? We tried to study Lecter. We thought here's an opportunity to make a landmark study. It's so rare to get one alive. One what? A pure psychopath. That's obviously what he is. But he's impenetrable. Much too sophisticated for the standard test, and my, does he hate us. He thinks I'm his nemesis. Carford's very clever, isn't he? Using you on Lecter. What do you mean, Dr. Chillington? A young woman to turn him on. I believe he called it. I don't believe Lecter's seen a woman in several years. We have gotten a glimpse of one of the cleaning people. We generally keep women out of there. They're trouble in detention. Well, fuck off, Chillington. I graduated from the University of Virginia with honors. Doctor. It's not a charm school. Then you should be able to remember the rules. Do not reach through the bars. Do not touch the bars. You pass him nothing but soft paper. No pens, no pencils. He has his own felt-tipped pens some of the time. The paper you pass him must be free of staples, paper clips, or pins. Items are only passed to him through the sliding food carrier. Items come back out through the sliding food carrier. No exceptions. Do not accept anything he attempts to hold out to you through the barrier. Do you understand me? I understand. They had passed through two more gates and left the natural light behind. Now they were beyond the wards where inmates can mix together, down in the region where there can be no windows and no mixing. The hallway lights are covered with heavy grids, like the lights in the engine rooms of ships. Chillington paused beneath one. When their footfalls stopped, Starling could hear somewhere beyond the wall the ragged end of a voice ruined by shouting. Lecter is never outside his cell without wearing full restraints and a mouthpiece, Chillington said. I'm going to show you why. He was a model of cooperation for the first year after he was committed. Security around him was slightly relaxed. This was under the previous administration, you understand. On the afternoon of July 8th, 1976, he complained of chest pain and he was taken to the dispensary. His restraints were removed to make it easier to give him an electrocardiogram. When the nurse bent over him, he did this to her. Chillington handed Clarice Starling a dog-eared photograph. The doctors managed to save one of her eyes. Lecter was hooked up to the monitors the entire time. He broke her jaw to get at her tongue. His pulse never got over 85, even when he swallowed it. Starling didn't know which was worse. The photograph or Chillington's attention as he gleaned her face with fast, grabby eyes. She thought of a thirsty chicken pecking tears off her face. I keep him in here, Chillington said, and pushed a button beside heavy double doors of security glass. A big orderly let them into the block beyond. Starling made a tough decision and stopped just inside the doors. Dr. Chillington, we really need these test results. If Dr. Lecter feels you're his enemy, if he's fixed on you, just as you've said, we might have more luck if I approached him by myself. What do you think? Chillington's cheek twitched. That's perfectly fine with me. You might have suggested that in my office. I could have sent an orderly with you and saved the time. I could have suggested it there if you'd briefed me there. I don't expect I'll see you again, Miss Starling. Barney. When she's finished with Lecter, ring for someone to bring her out. Chillington left without looking at her again. Now there was only the big, impassive orderly and the soundless clock behind him, and his wire mesh cabinet with a mace and restraints, mouthpiece, and tranquilizer gun. A wall rack held a long pipe device with a U on the end for pinning the violin to the wall. The orderly was looking at her. Dr. Chillington told you, don't touch the bars. His voice was both high and hoarse. She was reminded of Otto Ray. Yes, he told me. Okay, it's past the others. The last cell on the right. Stay toward the middle of the corridor as you go down, and don't mind anything. You can take him his mail. Get off on the right foot. The orderly seemed privately amused. You just put it in the tray and let it roll through. If the tray's inside, you can pull it back with the cord, or he can send it back. He can't reach you where the tray stops outside. The orderly gave her 2 magazines, their loose pages spilling out, 3 newspapers, and several opened letters. The corridor was about 30 yards long, with cells on both sides. Some were padded cells with an observation window, long and narrow like an archery slit in the center of the door. Others were standard prison cells with a wall of bars opening on the corridor. Clarice Starling was aware of figures in the cells, but she tried not to look at them. She was more than halfway down when a voice hissed, I can smell your cunt. She gave no sign that she had heard it, and went on. The lights were on in the last cell. She moved toward the left side of the corridor to see into it. As she approached, no one on her heels announced her. End of chapter 2, and this will be the last chapter, chapter 3 for today. Dr. Lecter's cell is well beyond the others, facing only a closet across a corridor, and it is unique in other ways. The front is a wall of bars, but within the bars, at a distance greater than the human reach, is a second barrier, a stout nylon net, stretched from floor to ceiling and wall to wall. Beyond the net, Starling could see a table plotted to the floor and piled high with soft-covered books and papers and a straight chair, also fastened down. Dr. Hannibal Lecter himself reclined on his bunk, pursuing the Italian edition of Vogue. He held the loose papers in his right hand and put them beside him, one by one, with his left. Dr. Lecter has 6 fingers on his left hand. Claire Starling stopped, a little distance from the bars, about the length of a small foyer. Dr. Lecter! Her voice sounded all right to her. He looked up from his reading. For a steep second she thought his gaze hummed, but it was only her blood, and she heard. My name is Claire Starling. May I talk with you? Courtesy was implicit in her distance and her tone. Dr. Lecter considered. His finger pressed against his pursed lips. Then he rose in his own time and came forward smoothly in his cage, stopping short of the nylon web without looking at it, as though he chose the distance. She could see that he was small, sleek. In his hands and arms she saw wiry strength like her own. Good morning, he said, as though he had answered the door. His cultured voice has a slight metallic rasp beneath it, possibly from disuse. Dr. Lecter's eyes are maroon, and they reflect the light in pinpoints of red. Sometimes the points of light seem to fly like sparks to his center. His eyes held Starling's hold. She came a measured distance closer to the bars. The hair on her forearms rose and pressed against her sleeves. Doctor, we have heard of problem psychological profiling. I want to ask you for your help. We, being behavioral science at Quantanco, you're one of Jack Crawford's, I expect. I am, yes. May I see your credentials? She hadn't expected this. I showed them at the office. You mean you showed them to Frederick Chilton, Ph.D.? Yes. Did you see his credentials? No. The academy ones don't make extensive reading, I can tell you. Did you meet Alan? Isn't he charming? Which of them had you rather talk with? On the whole, I'd say Alan. You could be a reporter, Chillington, let in for money. I think I'm entitled to see your credentials. All right. She held up her laminated ID card. I can't read it at this distance. Send it through, please. I can't. Because it's hard? Yes. Ask Barney. The orderly came and considered. Dr. Lecter, I'll let this come through, but if you don't return it when I ask you to, if we have to bother everybody and secure you to get it, then I'll be upset. If you upset me, you'll have to stay bundled up until I feel better towards you. Meals through the tube. Dignity pants changed twice a day. The works. And I'll hold your mail for a week. Got it? Certainly, Barney. The card rolled through on the tray, and Dr. Lecter held it to the light. A trainee, it says. Trainee. Jack Crawford sent a trainee to interview me. He tapped the card against his small, white teeth and breathed in its smell. Dr. Lecter, Barney said. Of course. He put the card back in the tray carrier, and Barney pulled it to the outside. I'm still in training at the academy. Yes. Starling said, but we're not discussing the FBI. We're talking about psychology. Can you decide for yourself if I'm qualified and what we talk about? Dr. Lecter said. Actually, that's rather slippery of you. Barney, do you think Officer Starling might have a chair? Dr. Chillington didn't tell me anything about a chair. What do your manners tell you, Barney? Would you like a chair? Barney asked her. We could have had one, but he never usually nobody needs to stay that long. Yes, thank you, Starling said. Barney brought a folding chair from the locked closet across the hall, set it up, and left them. Now, Lecter said, sitting sideways at his table to face her, what did Miggs say to you? Who? Multiple Miggs, in the cell down there. He hissed at you. What did he say? He said, I can smell your cunt. I see. I myself cannot. You use Ivan's skin cream today. You use Ivan's skin cream. And sometimes you wear L'Air du Temps. But not today. Today you are determinedly unperfumed. How do you feel about what Miggs said? He's hostile for reasons I couldn't know. It's too bad. He's hostile to people. People are hostile to him. It's a loop. Are you hostile to him? I'm sorry, he's disturbed. Beyond that, he's he's noise. How did you know about the perfume? A puff from your bag when you got out your card. Your bag is lovely. Thank you. You bought your best bag, didn't you? Yes, it was true. She had saved for the classic casual handbag, and it was the best item she owned. It's much better than your shoes. Maybe they'll catch up. I have no doubt of it. Did you do the drawings on your walls, doctor? Do you think I called in a decorator? The one over the sink is a European city. It's Florence. That's the Palazzo Vecchio and the Duomo, seen from the Belvedere. Did you do it from memory? All the detail. Memory, Officer Starling, is what I have instead of a view. The other one is a crucifixion. The middle cross is empty. It's Golgoth after after the disposition. Crayon and magic marker on butcher paper. It's what the thief who had been promised paradise really got when they took the um, facetial lamb away. What was that? His leg's broken, of course, just like his companion who mocked Christ. Are you entirely innocent of the Gospel of St. John? Look at Duccio, then. He paints accurate crucifixions. How is Will Graham? How does he look? I don't know Will Graham. You know who he is. Jack Crawford's protege. The one before you. How does his face look? I've never seen him. This is called cutting up a few old touches. Alfred Starling, you don't mind, do you? Beats of silence, and she plunged. Better than that, we could touch up a few old cuts here. I brought. No, no, that's stupid and wrong. Never use wit in a sejouge. Listen, understanding a witticism and replying to it makes your subject perform a fast, detached scan that is inimical to mood. It is on the plank of mood that we proceed. You were doing fine. You'd been courteous and receptive to courtesy. You'd established trust by telling the embarrassing truth about Miggs, and then you come in with a ham-handed sidge into your questionnaire. It won't do. Dr. Lecter, you're an experienced clinical psychiatrist. Do you think I'm dumb enough to try to run some kind of mood scam on you? Give me some credit. I'm asking you to respond to the questionnaire, and you will or you won't. Would it hurt to look at the thing? Officer Starling, have you read any of the papers coming out of behavioral science recently? Yes, so have I. The FBI stupidly refuses to send me the law enforcement bulletin, but I get it from secondhand dealers, and I have the news from John Jay and the psychiatric journals. They're dividing the people who practice serial murder into two groups, organized and disorganized. What do you think of that? It's fundamentally, they evidently, simplistic is the word you want. In fact, most psychology is purelu. Officer Starling and the practice in behavioral science is on a level with phrenology. Psychology doesn't get very good material to start with. Go to any psychology department and look at the students at faculty. Ham radio enthusiasts and other personality deficients buffs, hardly the best brains on the campus, organized and disorganized. A real bottom feeder thought of that. How would you change the classification? I wouldn't. Speaking of publications, I read your pieces on surgical addiction and left side, right side facial displays. Yes, they were first rate, Dr. Lecter said. I thought so, and so did Jack Crawford. He pointed them out to me. That's one reason he's anxious for you. Crawford, the stoic, is anxious. He must be busy if he's recruiting help from the student body. He is, and he wants busy with Buffalo Bill. I expect so. No, not I expect so. Officer Starling, you know perfectly well it's Buffalo Bill. I thought Jack Crawford might have sent you to ask me about that. No, then you're not working around to it. No, I came because we need you, or what do you know about Buffalo Bill? Nobody knows much. Has everything been in the papers? I think so. Dr. Lecter, I haven't seen any confidential material in that case. My job is, how many women has Buffalo Bill used? The police have found five. All flailed. Partially, yes. The papers have never even explained his name. Do you know why he's called Buffalo Bill? Yes. Tell me. I'll tell you if you'll look at this questionnaire. I'll look, that's all. Now, why? It started as a bad joke in Kansas City homicide. Yes? They call him Buffalo Bill because he skins his humps. Starling discovered that she had traded feelings frightened for feeling cheap. Of the two, she preferred feeling frightened. Sent through the questionnaire. Starling rolled the blue section threw on the tray. She sat still while Lecter flipped through it. He dropped it back in the carrier. Oh, Officer Starling, do you think you can just dissect me with this blunt little tool? No, I think you can provide some insight and advance this study. And what possible reason could I have to do that? Curiosity? About what? About why you're here. About what happened to you. Nothing happened to me. Officer Starling, I happened. You can't reduce me to a set of influences. You've given up good and evil for behavioralism. Officer Starling, you've got everybody in moral dignity. Pants. Nothing is ever anybody's fault. Look at me. Officer Starling, can you stand to say I'm evil? Am I evil, Officer Starling? I think you've been destructive. For me, it's the same thing. Evil's just destructive. Then storms are evil. It was that simple. And we have fire. And then there's hail. Underwriters lump it all under acts of God. Deliberate. I collect church collapses recreationally. Did you see the recent one in Sicily? Marvelous! A facet fell on 65 grandmothers at a special mass. Was that was that evil? If so, who did it? If he's up there, he just loves it, Officer Starling. Tapoid and swans, it all comes from the same place. I can't explain you, doctor, but I know who can. He stopped her with his upraised hand. The hand was shapely, she noticed, and the middle finger perfectly replicated. It is the rarest form of paleodactyl. When he spoke again, his soft and pleasant, "You'd like to quantify me, Officer Starling. You're so ambitious, aren't you? Do you know what you look like to me? With your good bag and your cheap shoes. You look like a ruby. You're a well-scrubbed, hustling rube with a little taste. Your eyes are like cheap birthstones, all surface shine when you stalk some little answer. And you're bright behind them, aren't you? Desperate not to be like your mother. Good nutrition has given you some length of bone, but you're not more than one generation out of the mines. Officer Starling. It's the West Virginia Starlings or the Okie Starlings. Officer? It was a toss-up between college and the opportunities in the Women's Army course. Wasn't it? Let me tell you something specific about yourself, Student Starling. Back in your room, you have a string of gold ad-ab beads, and you feel an ugly little thumb when you look at how tacky they are now. Isn't that so? All those tedious thank yous, permitting all the sincere fumblings, getting all sticky once for every bead. Tedious, tedious. Boring. Being smart spoils a lot of things, doesn't it? And taste isn't kind. When you think about this conversation, you'll remember the dumb animal hurt in his face when you got rid of him. If the Ada beads got tacky, what else will as you go along? You wonder, don't you, at night? Dr. Lecter asked in the kindest of tones. Starling raised her head to face him. You see a lot, Dr. Lecter. I won't deny anything you've said. But here's a question you're answering for me right now. Whether you mean to or not, are you strong enough to point that high-powered perception at yourself? It's hard to face. I found that out in the last few minutes. How about it? Look at yourself and write down the truth. What more fit or complex subject could you find? Or maybe you're afraid of yourself. You're tough, aren't you, Officer Starling? Reasonably so. Yes. And you hate to think you were common. Wouldn't that sting? My. Well, you're far from common, Officer Starling. All you have is fear of it. What are you at a bead? 7 millimeter? 7. Let me make a suggestion. Get some loose, drilled tiger eyes and string them alternately with the gold beads. You might want to do 2 and 3 or 1 and 2, however looks best to you. The tiger eyes will pick up the color of your own eyes and the highlights in your hair. Has anyone ever sent you a Valentine? Yep. We're already into Lent. Valentine's Day is only a week away. Are you expecting some? You never know. No, you never do. I've been thinking about Valentine's Day. It reminds me of something funny. Now that I think of it, I can make you very happy on Valentine's Day. Clarice Starling. How, Dr. Lecter? By sending you a wonderful Valentine. I'll have to think about it. Now please excuse me. Goodbye, Officer Starling. And the study? A census taker tried to quantify me once. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a big Armand. Go back to school, little Starling. Hannibal Lecter, polite to the last, did not give her his back. He stepped backward from the barrier before he turned to his cot again, and lying on it became as remote from her as a stone crusader lying on a tomb. Starling felt suddenly empty, as though she had given blood. She took longer than necessary to put the papers back in her briefcase, because she didn't immediately trust her legs. Starling was soaked with the failure she detested. She folded her chair and leaned it against the utility closet door. She would have to pass Miggs again. Barney, in the distance, appeared to be reading. She could call him to come for her. Damn Miggs! It was no worse than passing construction crews or delivery louts every day in the city. She started back down the corridor. Close beside her, Miggs' voice hissed. I bent my wrist so I can die. See how it bleeds? She should have called Barney, but startled, she looked into the cell, saw Miggs flick his fingers and felt the warm spatter on her cheek and shoulder before she could turn away. She got away from him, registered that it was semen, not blood, and Lecter was calling to her. She could hear him. Dr. Lecter's voice behind her, the cutting rasp in it more pronounced. Officer Starling! He was up and calling after her as she walked. She rummaged in her purse for tissues. Behind her, Officer Starling! She was on the cold rails of her control now, making steady progress toward the gate. Officer Starling! A new note in Lecter's voice. She stopped. What in God's name do I want this bad? Miggs hissed something she didn't listen to. She stood again in front of Lecter's cell and saw the rare spectacle of the doctor agitated. She knew that he could smell it on her. He could smell everything. I would not have had that happen to you. Discourtesy is unspeakably ugly to me. It was as though committing murders had purged him of lesser rudeness, or perhaps Starling thought it excited him to see her marked in this particular way. She couldn't tell. The sparks in his eyes flew into his darkness like fireflies down a cave. Whatever it is, use it. Jesus. She held up her briefcase. Please do this for me. Maybe she was too late. He was calm again. No, but I'll make you happy that you came. I'll give you something else. I'll give you what you love the most, Claire Starling. What's that, Dr. Lecter? An advancement, of course. It works out perfectly. I'm so glad Valentine's Day made me think of it. The smile over his small white teeth could have come for any reason. He spoke so softly she could barely hear. Look in Razapal's car for your Valentines. Did you hear me? Look in Razapal's car for your Valentines. You better go now. I don't think Miggs could manage again so soon, even if he is crazy. Do you? That's the end of chapter 3. Now, I would like to thank you for listening and be expecting more chapters from this reading and other readings like it in the future. For my own personal commentary, I will say this. So far, I am liking very much the reading, and I think it's great. I must also advise you that I claim no ownership of the book or its context at all. I give all credit to the publishers, the author, and so on and so forth. Thank you again. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications for any new coming updates. I would like to remind you that my bio will be in the description. And please, stay comfortable. Goodbye.